And today, as we prepare to take up in the next couple of weeks transportation policy for our country and transportation funding to fund that policy, there's some late-breaking news this morning from the House of Representatives that they've taken a very, very modest transportation bill, including funding, authorization. We kind of a two-part deal here. We actually authorize transportation policy, and then we try to figure out how to pay for it. Too often in the past, we have decided to pay for it by bailing out the Transportation Trust Fund. And the legislation we passed, I voted against here in the Senate last month on transportation. I served last Congress. I chaired the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation Infrastructure. I'm, I think, the #2 Democrat on the Environment and Public Works bill. I'm an old governor, former governor, spent a lot of time, 8 years as governor for my own state, Delaware, focused on transportation infrastructure, chaired the National Governors Association for a year, and so I looked at these issues nationally as well as a governor. But if you look at the authorization bill, again, that's one of the two parts of our legislation, to authorize programs. A lot of what we did in the Senate, coupled with what they did in the House, was pretty darn good. I was very proud of it. I want to give shout-outs to some of my colleagues, Senator Boxer, Senator Inhofe. You don't always think of them as two people who work closely well together, but on transportation issues, on infrastructure issues, they do, and provided very good leadership. And they were good enough to let the rest of us join in. And I think we had a good policy or series of policies that we can be proud of. And I'll just run through a couple of them here off of this chart. I've been made a big focus on freight transportation. It's not just people who use roads, highways, bridges, or transit to get places, but we move an enormous amount of freight in this country. We move a lot of freight in this country on barges. Actually, not many people think of that, or ships. We move a fair amount in airplanes. We move a fair amount on trains. We also move a great deal of our freight by roads, highways, and bridges. And the legislation that we passed out of the Environment and Public Works Committee on, I believe, a unanimous vote, makes really good progress on the freight transportation side, trying to make our roads, highways, bridges more reliable, more affordable, and more efficient. That's good. Well, the legislation we passed out of committee, which I think is mirrored in the House bill, House transportation bill, is that we prioritize bridge safety. I think something like one out of every 4 bridges in our country is deemed by people a lot smarter than me that they're not safe. And so in our legislation, we focused on bridge safety. We focused on large facilities, large projects of national importance, not little bitty projects, but big ones of national importance, regional importance. The legislation, the transportation authorization legislation from the House and from the Senate also increases baseline funding and funding for public transportation. And it focuses on clean air funding toward the most dangerous diesel emissions to address the bang for the buck, if you will. If you ever go by road projects or road, highway, bridge projects, and diesel projects, or rather transit projects, you will oftentimes see is yellow equipment. It's usually yellow equipment. It's almost always powered by diesel, and they put out those vehicles put out a lot of pollution. And we provide a little bit of money here in the authorization legislation to say, well, that can't be good for us. It can't be good for the people who live around there, work around there. And let's see if we can't get some reduction in those emissions. And the other thing I liked about our authorization bill was the research grants that go to states to see if we can't find a better alternative to user fees, which we've historically, traditionally used, and to eventually replace the gas tax with something that makes more sense. It could be something we call vehicle miles traveled. In Oregon, they call it a road user charge. It could be tolling. It could be tolling in conjunction with public-private partnerships. But just to look at the alternatives to user fees, like the gas tax, like the diesel tax, which has not been raised for 22 years. Let's see what we got next. Last time we raised the user fees in this country, part of me wishes I could be doing, Mr. President, part of me wishes I could be doing this speech surrounded by former presidents who have supported the use of user fees. And I think if we go back to a long time, actually when I was just a little kid, before you were born, but Dwight Eisenhower, the president who brought us the interstate highway system, he was an advocate of user fees. He felt that things were worth having, they're worth paying for. Since then, we've had other presidents. Let me think of another president who thought that was I think Bill Clinton thought user fees were an appropriate use. I think I want to say George Herbert Walker Bush might have been one of the people who thought that if things are worth having, the folks that use, businesses that use our roads, highways, bridges ought to pay for it. I think there might have even been one more. Ronald Reagan, who supported the notion as well. So bipartisan, Democrats and Republican governors have said for a long time, if we really want to have a better transportation system, we got to pay for it. And the idea that the folks who use that system, the businesses that use that transportation system, have some responsibility to pay for it. That's been the way we've done it for a long time. And maybe someday when we have the ability to do these vehicle miles travel deals where not to have to worry about privacy concerns, and we figure out how many miles every car, truck, van, in the truck in the country travels, and be able to assess a user fee. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. We've been trying to do this in Oregon for a long time. But maybe we'll someday have the ability to do that. But and that's to be a pure user fee. But there are concerns that have been raised about doing that as well. So, but anyway, since 1993, what's been happening? Well, maintenance costs have continued to rise. We raised the gas tax in 1993 to 18.3 cents. We raised the diesel per gallon. We raised the tax on diesel, federal tax on diesel, to I think 24.3 cents, something like that. And what has happened in the last 22 years, believe it or not, cost of concrete has gone up a lot. The cost of asphalt has gone up a lot. The cost of steel, cost of labor has gone up a lot. And the gas tax and the diesel tax have stayed right where they are, right where they were 22 years ago. The gas tax has lost some 40% of its purchasing power. 18.3 cents from 1993 is today worth about a dime. And I think the 24.3 cent diesel tax is now worth somewhere between 10 and 15 cents. And we have done nothing about it. Nothing about it. We've not even been willing to consider indexing these user fees to the rate of inflation. Again, why has the Highway Trust Fund eroded? Not everybody knows we have a highway or transportation trust fund. We do. Not everybody understands it's largely fed by user fees. It is. Not everybody understands that when we run out of money in the transportation trust fund, we have to, if we're going to still build roads, highways, bridges, and transit systems, we got to do something about it. And what we oftentimes do is we move money from the general fund from our country and move that money over to fill up the transportation trust fund or the highway fund. When we run out of money in the general fund, we go around the world tin cup in hand, and borrow money from all kinds of people, including the Chinese, and say, we'd like to borrow some money from you. And by the way, we don't want you to be mucking around in the South China Sea or Spratly Island and all those other places where I used to fly around as a naval flight officer. We don't want you to be manipulating your currency. We don't want you to be dumping your stuff, your products on our markets. And the Chinese, one of the things they're thinking of maybe saying is, we thought you wanted to borrow money, and so get off our backs. We don't want to be in that situation. There is a growing need for road repairs. I mentioned earlier on the bridges, 1 out of 4 bad. Highways service, something like 2 out of every 10 miles of highway services are not good. We got vehicles that are more fuel efficient. That's a good thing. CAFE legislation, which we adopted. Dianne Feinstein was the lead on that. She was good enough to let some of us help her write that. But over the next probably 10 years or so ahead of us, we're going to continue to require more energy-efficient vehicles. There's been actually a reduction in annual miles driven. The millennial generation, a lot of them don't want to have a car. And I remember as a kid growing up, maybe you as Mr. President, maybe you as a kid growing up couldn't wait till you could drive or have a car. And that was true of my generation. Not so my sons. One yes, one no. And we got an aging system here, an aging system that needs to be addressed. In the face of congressional inaction, what have we done to pay for our transportation system? Well, we use budget gimmicks. We're pretty good at pension smoothing. Those pensions must be pretty smooth by now because we've used that. We've used unrelated offsets to pay for stuff. Say, for example, monies that go to TSA to supposedly to provide the safer travel in our airlines and airways. We're going to use that money instead to go into transportation, money that should be used to strengthen our ability to monitor traffic coming across our borders, a lot of it vehicular traffic, a lot of trade. We're going to raise those fees, customs fees, but we're not going to use them to strengthen our defenses along our border. And other stuff that frankly just has no relationship with transportation. That's what we've done. Gimmicks. What's next? It's not an easy thing to think about, but these are some numbers that we ought to look at. We bailed out the Transportation Trust Fund in 2008 to the tune of $8 billion. We bailed it out again in 2009, $7 billion. Next year, 2010, almost $20 billion. 2013, over $6 billion. And we really got into the bailout business in 2014, $23 billion. And the current year, $10 billion. $10 billion, you add it all up, and it's about a $75 billion bailout. We move money from the general fund. That means we don't have money to spend other things that are legitimate needs in our country. And we're using it to pay for things we ought to actually pay for or be paid for by the folks who use, the businesses who use our roads, highways, and bridges. Now, I've had a lot of people say to me, why should we raise these user fees? Why should we raise the gas tax or the diesel tax? And I put it to simple, it's fair. It is fair. The notion that folks, people, businesses who use these roads and highways and bridges ought to pay for them. To me, that seems fair. And frankly, it seemed fair in this country for, 60 years. For 60 years, and we seem to have gotten away from that. We need to get back to that. A couple of questions. Same question asked several times. Why raise the gas tax, the diesel tax, and fix the trust fund? This is $324. What is $324? That's how much the average driver in this country spends a year on repairs to their vehicles. With replacement of tires, we've done that. Axles, tire rims, wheel rims, you name it. It adds up to anywhere from, I've seen actually estimates as high as $500. We'll take the lower end, $324. We pay for it one way or the other. And that's how much we spend on the average in vehicle repairs. Again, the same question, why raise the gas tax? Fix the trust fund. The number 42 shows up here. That's because that's how many hours a year we spend sitting in traffic on average. It's not my number. It's every year Texas A&M updates this number. And they say in cities like Washington, D.C. or Philadelphia, up the road from where Senator Coons and I live, New York City, up the road where some our family members live, or from Denver, L.A., you name it. It's about 82 hours per year. 82 hours per year. That's how much time we spend just sitting in traffic, putting out wasting gas, putting out emissions, harmful emissions. And this is the number of billions of gallons of gas that we waste just sitting in traffic every year. 2.9 billion gallons of gas. That's a lot. That's a lot. I don't know if it's the last poster that we have, but it's not a bad one to close on. Much of my public life, as Senator Coons, my colleague, is waiting here for me to stop talking so he can speak. But he knows, he's heard me talk any number of times, and I've heard him to say one of the major roles of government is to provide a nurturing environment for job creation and job preservation. We have many roles in government, but a major role of government is to provide a nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation. We don't create jobs. Senators don't create jobs. Governors don't create jobs. County executives, no matter how talented they are, presidents don't create jobs. But what we do is create a nurturing environment that helps support job creation and job growth. What does that include? World-class workforce. Young people, not so young people coming out of our colleges, universities, who can read, write, can think, out of our high schools, who can read, write, think, use math, technology, good work ethic. The public safety, rule of law, affordable energy, affordable health care, access to foreign markets, and also the ability to move goods and products from place to place in this country and to export markets outside of this country. Our friends at McKinsey have an entity, it's a wing of a piece of their operation, big consulting firm, and it's called Global Institute, McKinsey Global Institute. They've done a little bit of thinking and calculating to see if we actually made robust investments, fully robust, not just limp along investments, or not just creeping from year to year, borrowing money from the general fund, but we actually made robust investments. What would it do? What would it do? Among the things that it would do, we're talking about 50 to 120 billion annual investments from all sources, state, local, federal. Do this for 15 to 20 years. What would it do in terms of employment in this country and in terms of GDP in this country? Well, here's what it would do. It would add those kinds of investments in our transportation system would raise GDP by anywhere from about 1.4 to 1.8% per year. Per year. Not one time, per year. In addition to that, about 1.8, almost 2 million jobs. And about half those jobs would be men and women going to work building roads, highways, bridges, transit systems. Roughly the other half would, because we'd have a more efficient economy. In just a time, economy actually move products and goods much more effectively, much more efficiently, and have a more efficient, more productive economy. So we say thanks very much to the folks from McKinsey Global Institute. If we actually do, a lot of the people who will be put to work, building our roads, highways, bridges, and transit system, they haven't been working much lately because we've underfunded transportation investment now for years at the federal level and at the state and local level. And if we would fund it in a more appropriate way, more robust way, we put a lot of people who have been on the sidelines, unemployed or underemployed, put them to work, doing something productive with their lives again. And at the same time, we can strengthen our economy and strengthen our economic recovery. So that's it, Mr. President. I see my colleagues have been waiting patiently for me to finish. And I'll close with these words. Someone said to me, how do I feel? The House seems to have come up with a little more money. We're not sure the pay for that they're using. I don't understand it well. I don't think most of us do. Somehow we found some magic money in the Federal Reserve, and I hope it's legitimate. I hope there aren't any unintended consequences that we're not aware of. So we'll find out about that over the next several days, I hope. But I'm not outraged by, I was frankly outraged by what we passed here a month or so ago. So grossly underfunded, 3 years funding, not very thoughtful funding. And what we hear from the House is that it's more robust. And I'm happy to take a look at that. But what it is not a user fee approach. It basically doesn't say, okay, those who use our roads, highways, bridges ought to pay for them. We stray from that. We stray from that. And sort of a grab bag of places that have nothing to do for money, nothing to do for transportation, and we're going to use that money. And it's only for a short while. We'll be back in the soup again in 4 or 5 years. I think we can do better than that. So you can just color me disappointed, deeply disappointed. And we live to fight another day, but it's too bad we didn't take advantage of this day and seize the day. Thank you, Mr. President.